Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving into something that is honestly pretty profound, and that's the fear of wasting your life, along with the deep psychology of regret. It's a topic that, whether we like to admit it or not, touches absolutely all of us. So, to really get a grip on this, I want you to clear your mind for just a second and come on a quick mental journey with me.
Picture this. Imagine waking up tomorrow morning, you open your eyes, and suddenly you're 70 years old. You're just sitting there quietly looking back at the entire expanse of your life. The years have completely flown by. But in this specific moment, your mind isn't actually focusing on the embarrassing mistakes you made or the things you actually did. No, your mind is fixated on something else entirely. It's focused on all the things you never did.
And what's really fascinating here is what this thought experiment reveals about the true nature of human regret. It's about that business you never started. It's the person you never quite worked up the nerve to tell how you truly felt. The places you never visited. The dreams you just kept postponing, year after year, until one day there was literally no time left. You see, the pain in this 70-year-old scenario doesn't come from your actions. It comes from your inaction.
Which brings us right to the core psychological problem we're unpacking today. The absolute greatest tragedy in life isn't failure. It's realizing that you spent your entire life just waiting to live. This is the very essence of the psychology of regret, and it perfectly explains why millions of people unknowingly waste the only life they're ever going to have. They just spend the whole thing sitting in the waiting room. So how does this actually happen? Well, nobody wakes up in the morning, looks in the mirror, and says, you know what, today I'm going to waste my life. It doesn't work like some sudden catastrophe. It happens quietly. It happens one tiny, postponed decision at a time. It's this slow, almost unnoticeable fade into what we can basically call the invisible prison.
And how does this build up over time? I mean, we all know these phrases, right? Oh, I'll start next month. I'll travel when I have a little more money saved up. I'll chase that dream just as soon as I feel completely ready. But what actually happens? Days become weeks. Weeks blur into years. And without you even realizing it, waiting becomes a permanent lifestyle. The most secure prison you will ever be locked inside isn't made of concrete and steel. It's made entirely of the phrase, one day.
To really understand why we do this to ourselves, we have to look at the underlying biology. And here is the bizarre truth about human psychology. Your brain doesn't actually care if you succeed. That's not its primary job. Its first and really its only priority is to keep you safe. Thousands of years ago, taking unnecessary risks could literally get you killed. So, thanks to evolutionary biology, your brain is hardwired to avoid uncertainty at absolutely all costs.
And this just brilliantly illustrates the trap our ancient survival instincts set for us in the modern world. Because your brain craves safety so intensely, staying exactly where you are feels comfortable, even when you're actively miserable. Given the choice, your brain will almost always choose familiar pain, the discomfort you already know, over unfamiliar possibility, which carries the risk of the unknown. We literally trick ourselves into choosing a comfortable unhappiness just so we can feel secure.
Because of this deep biological drive for safety, we start making little compromises. And right there, that is exactly where regret is born. Regret doesn't just magically appear when you're old and gray. It starts way earlier. It's born every single time you ignore the life you truly want. It happens with every opportunity you brush off, every difficult conversation you dodge, and every big dream you quietly abandon just to keep the peace and stay in your comfort zone.
Just let these words sink in for a second. At first, regret whispers. Years later, it screams. When you first abandon a dream, it's just this tiny nagging feeling. You can brush it off. But as time goes on, the compounding weight of all those avoided risks becomes absolutely deafening. And the painful truth we all have to confront is that the most agonizing regrets almost never come from falling flat on our faces. They come from never even trying.
Now throw the modern era into the mix, and there's a whole other layer making this paralysis so much worse. You open up social media, and suddenly everyone seems wildly successful. Everyone looks happier. Everyone seems miles ahead of you. So your brain falls straight into the comparison trap, weighing your very real, very messy day-to-day life against someone else's highly curated highlight reel. And instead of this motivating you to get moving, it actually just makes you feel incredibly small. The more you compare, the less you actually live.
Which leads us to a deeply fascinating psychological phenomenon. Psychologists have found that people who feel stuck often spend massive amounts of time imagining alternate versions of their lives. They build up this entire phantom existence in their heads, the life never lived, and they basically use it to torture themselves. They walk around haunted by these internal phantom questions. Man, what if I had just said yes? What if I had actually taken that opportunity? What if I had just believed in myself for 5 minutes? Continually imagining these alternative realities actually becomes a massively heavy psychological burden, because these imagined lives built entirely on what-ifs eventually become far more painful than any real tangible failure you could have ever experienced out in the real world.
So why on earth is a real failure better than a what if? Well, think about it. Concrete failure eventually ends. You try, you fail, it hurts, you process the pain, you learn a lesson, and you move on. But the uncertainty of waiting, that infinite loop of what if, that can literally last forever. Uncertainty haunts you simply because there is zero closure.
Okay, so knowing all of this, knowing that our own biology is trying to lock us in a safe, invisible prison of one day, and knowing that inaction breeds a regret that lasts forever, how do we actually escape? The answer is incredibly simple, but it is definitely not easy. You cannot sit around waiting for motivation to strike. You cannot wait for someone to hand you permission.
Here is the actual sequence of how you break out. See, we always get this backward. We think we need to feel completely confident before we take action. Actually, scratch that. It's the exact opposite. Action comes first. Every small, wildly uncomfortable decision you make changes your future. You take the scary step, and then the confidence shows up later. And as you keep taking those uncomfortable steps, step 3 kicks in. Your fear starts to weaken. Your life changes the exact second you stop waiting for permission and just start moving.
Let's jump back one last time into that time machine. You're that 70-year-old version of yourself we talked about earlier. One day, you will look back on your life. And when you do, the main question you ask yourself isn't going to be, did everything go perfectly? Because spoiler alert, it won't. The real question you're going to have to answer is this: did you have the courage to live the life that was truly yours? Time never taps you on the shoulder to announce it's leaving. It just disappears. And one ordinary day will eventually become the memory you wish you had appreciated.
So, what you absolutely need to take away from this explainer is this final, powerful thought. Please, don't spend your entire life just preparing to live. Live it right now, before one day quietly morphs into too late. The biggest risk isn't failing. It's reaching the end of your life and realizing you never truly lived. So take the risk, make the hard choice, and step out of the waiting room today.